Between new witnesses like former Oath Keeper spokesperson we just heard about, plus new testimony and a documentary, we still have a lot to unpack about the January 6th committee hearing. So let's bring in our panel and get right into it. Clay Kane is a radio host on Sirius XM and a Democratic strategist. And Rena Shaw is the senior advisor for Republic Women for Progress and a former Republican strategist. Welcome to you both. So let's start with the documentary that debuted earlier this morning on Discovery Plus, Unprecedented. Will be used as evidence in this hearing this week. Here's what Trump says in the film about January 6th.
Can we talk for a minute about January 6th?
Yeah. Well, it was a sad day, but it was a day where there was great anger in our country. The people went to Washington primarily because they were angry with an election that they think was rigged. A very small portion, as you know, went down to the Capitol, and then a very small portion of them went in. But I will tell you, they were angry from the standpoint of what happened in the election, because they're smart and they see and they saw what happened. And I believe that that was a big part of what happened on January 6th.
Clay, I know you've watched the full documentary. So how important do you think it will be to these hearings?
I think it's crucial. I think one of the big takeaways for the documentary for me was that, one, Trump does not know the definition of democracy. Two, to be honest, Mike Pence is a political robot. But one of the most crucial parts of the doc was when one of the commentators said that, what if Trump had been a more sophisticated leader? What if he had better lawyers? And that, for me, is the real issue, Michael. It's that the issue really isn't Trump. The issue are the enablers in the Republican Party. And that the next time they try and overturn an election, it'll be quieter. It's not going to be a massive insurrection. So I think for me, this committee is so crucial. This doc lays it out well. And in the future, Trump or not, for me, I'm looking to Mitch McConnell. I'm looking to Senator Tim Scott. I'm looking to Justice Clarence Thomas and his wife, Virginia Thomas. That is the contagion that we have in the Republican Party.
So, Rena, one of those enablers is Steve Bannon. And if he ends up testifying in a live hearing, wouldn't there be some danger in giving him that platform for what certainly will be a contentious exchange with the panel?
In many ways, Michael, I think Steve Bannon was the architect of the authoritarian Trump that we witnessed over the course of many years. He just grew more and more bold. And why? Steve Bannon was whispering in his ear. I'm very concerned, Michael, very concerned about sort of this rise of silent authoritarianism in the Republican Party, how it's been just swept under the rug, not just by the usual suspects in Congress, but by, it feels like, just everywhere, look from the top down, all the way down to local leaders. You say, well, look, you know, Trump was a guy who we knew who he was, and now he's probably toast. He's probably done. Let's go for somebody like Governor DeSantis. Well, guess what? He's not, he may be palatable, but he's not quite different when you look at exactly how he wants to lay out his plan to get to his policy goals. And are they even really policy goals? So the committee has its work cut out for it, no doubt. And of course, I think the turn in the road was Cassidy Hutchinson's, you know, emotional testimony in many ways. I think the evocation of emotion that she was able to bring to that table the day she testified didn't leave the minds of many of those in Congress. And maybe, just maybe this week, we might hear some different tunes from those in Congress who have previously supported Trump so fervently.
And Rena, I want to follow up on what you said about influence in particular, because Maryland Governor Larry Hogan was on Meet the Press this morning, and he talked about Trump's influence within the Republican Party. Let me play a little bit of what he said.
President Trump's influence on the party was going to diminish over time. It hasn't happened, rapidly, but it has diminished dramatically. And there are only about 34% of Republican primary voters who want to see the president run again.
I mean, is he right about that? Is Trump's influence diminishing? Because I don't necessarily have that vibe, but you help me out.
Well, if you're talking to people around the country, they don't talk about Trump as much as they used to. I think that's fair. I think it's sort of this thing we do inside the Beltway. We almost get inside of our heads thinking, well, this is a dominant topic around here, so it's got to be on the minds of Americans that same way. In my native West Virginia, I can tell you, people have moved on in a way. Of course, they'll say they like Donald Trump because of the things Trump said to them for years. But are they willing to make a change because they want something different? The answer is yes. So, look, it's not a simple answer. It's not the one people want to hear, but I firmly believe that Trumpism can be defeated in my lifetime. It may not happen tomorrow. It may not happen next month, but it can be, because we have to appeal to the hearts and minds of the reasonable faction of the Republican Party. And they're out there. They've just been silent for too long.
Okay, I buy a little bit of that, and I'm just going to put a pin in that. I want to revisit that with you a little bit later, because I want to go back to Clay and switch up gears a little bit. Reporters concerned, obviously, about President Biden, cornered rather, President Biden this morning while he was on a bike ride. They asked him about what is still one of the most contentious issues in our country, Roe versus Wade, and this is what he had to say.
As president, I don't have the authority to say that we're going to, state Roe v. Wade as the law of the land. The only way we do that is through an election in the United States Congress. In the meantime, states can make those judgments. So my ultimate goal is to reinstate Roe v. Wade as a national law by passing it in the United States Congress, and I'll sign it the moment that happens.
So let's be very clear here. There's no way they're, going to be able to reinstate Roe versus Wade as national law. Now, unless the Democrats gain seats in the midterms, it's just not happening. So what's your prediction on that happening, and what's the strategy to make it happen?
Well, the strategy is always messaging. So, one of the things I think people should keep on protesting, peacefully protesting. But I've heard some calls for Biden to expand the Supreme Court. He can't do that. It has to go through Congress. I've heard calls for Biden to end the filibuster. He can't do that. It has to go through Congress. So if we want to make these changes, we have to show up and all the way, just like Republicans do. Republicans play the long game. And I got to push back a little bit on your guest. At this point, I don't see a reasonable side of the Republican Party. But what I can say is their strategy is incredible. They had a 50-year long game to overturn Roe v. Wade, and they made it happen. Sadly, on the Democratic side, if we don't get what we want in 4 or maybe 6 years, or even 2 years sometimes, we stop voting. So I think it's hammering in on the messaging and hammering in on civics and realizing that there are certain things the president cannot do. It must go through Congress.
Long game versus no game. Always a challenge. Always a challenge, baby. Clay Kane and Rena Shaw, thank you both very, very much. Next, we need to talk seriously about monkeypox. I know, we've had it up to here with pandemic fatigue, right? You're done. But our next guest says monkeypox cases are rising so fast, it's become an emergency. What you need to know right after the break.